Hello, everybody. This is the July 15th We the People Meet.org meeting, and we are interviewing candidates for the school board of the new school district, Aspen Peaks School District and District 3. We have several of the candidates for the board that are going to be joining us today. And we're excited to start with Nicki Brammer, who is running for that seat. And just want to give Nikki a chance to introduce herself and just say hello first before we get into questions. Go ahead, Nikki.
Sure. Hi, I'm Nicki Brammer. I'm a Highland resident for about 13 years. I've been involved in all of our public schools around here. My kids have gone to Highland and Timberline and Lone Peak and Westfield. They've gone to Mountainville Academy. And so at all of those schools, I've had a chance to get to know our wonderful teachers. I've had a chance to volunteer in classrooms, also on school community councils and with the PTA. So when we decided as a community to start a new school board, I thought that I had a lot of experience, and having been involved with the district split campaign in the fall, when we would talk to voters about that opportunity to begin a new school district, a lot of times they would have a great question, and we'd say something like, well, it depends on the future school board and how they decide this. And then, as I was advocating for a new school district, I would oftentimes say, this is how it's likely to play out. This is how we can best support teachers in the future. This is how we can best support programs. And so when it came time to file for school board in June, I started watching to see who was filing and who was trying to run for office. And about halfway through the week, there weren't a lot of people that were supporters of our new school district. And so I decided to throw my hat in the ring. I felt like I had a commitment to make sure that our school district got off on a good foot. And so I'm running for school board, and I hope to win your vote.
Wonderful. Thank you. You answered the first question I had, which was why do you want to join the school board? So that I think that was
Great.
in there. If there's more you want to say, then I'll you can throw that in during the second question, which is what do you have to offer as a school board member?
Oh, great. So I guess I would say first and foremost, I bring a lot of enthusiasm and love for public education. I love students and learning. I want them to have the best experience as they're growing and learning. When I moved to Highland, there was not a Montessori preschool, and I was interested in providing that for my kids. And so I actually went about getting certified as a Montessori teacher and director, and I started my own Montessori school. And it was a Montessori preschool, so it was that early childhood learning. And I ran that for about 3 years, and I just loved it. And so I do bring that experience of teaching and being able to, look at a student and try to figure out, what are they ready to learn? What are they missing in this concept, and being able to see the lights come on. And so I love that. In addition to having that teaching experience, and also running a school, I also have served on school community councils at Highland Elementary and at Timberline Middle School. And for those that don't know what a school community council is, it's probably the most similar volunteer position to a school board member. As a parent, you have to be elected. So there is an actual election. Other parents at the school have to go in and vote for you. There are teachers who also have to be elected. And then you work really closely with either the principal or administrators, to really look at the success and achievement in student learning at the school. And so the administrators will present different test scores, the average GPAs, and you'll meet monthly during the entire year. And they'll present, what those opportunities are to grow. They're the professionals. And so as parents, you kind of just sit there and you kind of listen, you can ask questions, and work towards goals. And then at the end of the school year, typically around March, as a school community council, you set very specific goals. And I'm not sure if everyone's aware of SITLA funding, but um, last November, we actually were able to vote on Amendment B to increase the amount of funds that we get from 4% of SITLA funds to 5%, which is fantastic. It basically was the legislature saying, we have enough in our rainy day fund, and we would like to send more of this money directly to schools so that they can be distributed at the most local level. And so at the end of the school year, you create your goals, you decide how you're going to disperse that money as a school community council. And it's really just a fantastic opportunity to weigh in and say how you'd like those dollars to be spent. And then the next year, if you're on the school community council, you get to see kind of the fruits of those goals and the fruits of how those funds have been spent. So, the last time I was at the Timberline Community Council 2 years ago, we had used our money to decrease class sizes. We had used our money to pay for additional math tutors because we were concerned about ninth graders specifically who were failing and not at that proficient level. And so it's all of the goals for the funding is really focused on student outcomes and student achievement.
That's great. Um, we had a preschool in my home because my wife has a degree in early childhood education,
Oh,
so
great.
I know a little bit about that world and got to be her little assistant. So that
And
was
isn't
fun.
it the greatest? I mean, preschool kids, they show up and they're just like, what are you going to teach me?
Yeah.
And, it's that spirit of learning that if only we could, keep that for all, K through
Yeah.
12 as well.
Right, right. And then we're a little bit short on time. I know we're going to go over the 15 minutes, but we might have to have shorter answers going forward if we want to get all the questions out. So the next one is, did you support the school district split and why?
I did support the school district split. I was surprised when the city councils unanimously voted to put that on our ballots for voters.
Mhm.
Um, but I had seen some problems over time where we had just grown too large. And, probably the biggest instance was that our school board was not able to pass bonds. And bond funding is critical to build schools and to restore schools. Those are the funds that we use for capital building projects. And where we were so large, we have explosive growth on the west side of Utah Lake, but we also have older schools that were built in the 60s and 70s and 80s in Orem that were needing to be rebuilt. And there was a majority in Orem that were not able to, we weren't passing bonds to send funds to build new schools on the west. And then also we weren't necessarily voting to build schools around it. So that was kind of the moment that we knew we really do need to divide the school district. The ratio of school board members to voter was just unwieldy. School boards ought to be the most local level. You ought to have very close contact to your school board members, and our school board members were representing more than our senators, more than our state senators, which makes it really difficult for those school board members to be in touch with their voters and their taxpayers and their parents.
Yeah.
Um, it's a big reason why I supported it.
That's great. Should the federal government be involved in our kids' education? If so, what involvement should they have?
So according to the 10th Amendment, any powers that are not expressly given to the federal government fall back to the state. And so um, with the recent administration, they're trying to dismantle the Department of Education. Now, a few years ago, there was a lot of discussion about what happens if we give education back to the states. I actually reached out at the time. I never thought I would be running for school board at the time, but I reached out to a state school board member named Leanne Wells Wood. And I said, hey, there's a lot of hype about this. This is starting to gain momentum.
Mhm.
If this were to happen, we ought to have a plan. And so I corresponded back and forth with Leanne a little bit, and I told her that, I'd love for the State Board of Education to start looking at what this looks like. If the federal government returns, the responsibility back to the states, what are we going to do? What kind of funding do we need on a state level? What kind of funding do we ask from the federal government to be giving us directly? Um, and on a state level, where do you fill in those gaps? So I do support the education being controlled at the state level. Um, I do believe that in the current discussions, um, the SPED funding, special education funding, Title I funding would still come from the federal government. And you could still manage that under the Department of Health and Human Services. And so I don't think that we would have to necessarily come up with those funds at the state level. They could just be reapportioned to that department. I've seen some great work by the federal government, the Department of Education, where they've come into Utah in Davis County and in Alpine, and they conducted some civil rights investigations up in Davis County. There was some discrimination that had been reported, and the parents there didn't feel like they were receiving enough investigation. They weren't getting a good response. And so somebody had reached out to the federal government. The DOJ had done an investigation, and ultimately they came into Davis County, to Davis School District, and said, here's what we've investigated. These are some significant instances of discrimination of Black and Brown students in your district. And here's our recommendations. And they worked with Davis County or Davis School District for about 5 years to correct those. And I think they have corrected them. But so that's an example where I see, that was a great thing that there was a way for parents to reach out to the federal government. That could still happen, under the DOJ, not necessarily under the Department of Education. You still have those civil rights investigators that could come out. But actual education being managed at the state level, we're great at controlling our funding. We love our teachers and our students. I believe that if we were given that opportunity, Utah would do very well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I think when there's a vacuum, when there's a need that needs to be met that's left because the federal government, for instance, backs out, then we're really good at filling in. Our state is very good at providing for our needs. And then the next few questions, by the way, I was just texting the next candidate, Mary, and told her that we need another 10 minutes, so we'll admit her in about 10 minutes. Um, the next question is, and in about, if you could maybe in about one minute to explain, how do you feel about vouchers?
Okay, vouchers are definitely a hot button issue, right? And in a lot of ways, there's one group that doesn't like vouchers, and there's another group that calls them scholarships, the Utah Fits All Scholarship.
Mhm.
Um, I support the idea of the Utah Fits All Scholarship. A few years ago, I actually did some polling on it, and our area, back then Highland Alpine and Cedar Hills, had about an 80% support of it. Other people call this backpack funding, which is the idea that those funds follow the student. Um, one of the reasons why I support the Utah Fits All Scholarship is because this is a totally different bucket of funding. It does not come out of the K through 12 funding bucket. It does come out of the income tax, but it's not stealing money from K through 12 education. It competes kind of like, you know, healthcare costs can come out of that income tax funding right now. So I do support it. One thing that I think is really important to recognize is that there are students that have to leave public education, whether they're being bullied, whether they have special needs. Our schools do a phenomenal job educating 95% of our kids, but there are some times where a child cannot safely attend school. They have been targeted, they have been harmed by other students, and they have to leave. And if you go and look at the Constitution, Utah's Constitution in Article 13, Section 5, the language that it talks there, this is the section all about revenue and taxation.
Mhm.
It specifically says that income taxes shall be used for the systems of education. And so, where we have students that we need to educate, in our inclusive environment, our goals to be inclusive to everyone, I don't think anyone would look at students that had to leave a neighborhood public school and say, well, you didn't fit into where 95% else of the other students did, so we're not going to help you anymore. That being said, I would also highlight that I initially felt that the $8,000 that were being given in that scholarship was too much. And even just this last January, I had been talking to Representative Carucci about how, on an elementary level where I had homeschooled one of my kids that had an autoimmune issue during COVID, I said, I would never need $8,000, to homeschool. I think I used about $1,500 to buy curriculum and to do that. And, other parents may need to hire tutors where they don't have teaching background. But I did feel like there was a place where we could have worked out a lower cost. And I do believe that in the last legislative session, there was a bill to adjust down that amount for the elementary grades.
Yeah.
And I think that that's probably a good compromise to make sure that that program can endure.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, should parents or governments have the ultimate say in a child's education? How do you feel about that topic?
100% parents. Parents are in charge of their children's education and growth and learning, and the government is a partner. And I feel like most teachers and administrators and districts in our area understand that, and they're all in to try to involve parents as much as they can. And I've appreciated that.
Okay. How would you, what would you do to fight to empower parents more over the system?
I think in a lot of ways, it's just educating as a school board member.
Mhm.
I've been really grateful for school board members that are verbose in explaining what they're doing at school board meetings and what are some of the policies that are needing attention. Um, I think that I would empower parents by letting them know, developing policies that we need feedback in. Right now, as a school board candidate, I would love to involve the community more. One of our first duties in office is going to be to hire a superintendent and a business manager. I have my ideas, but I would love to know what the community is looking for in a superintendent and a business manager. So I think really like 90% of the job is empowering parents by educating them about what our school district is doing, what your local schools are doing, and how they can stay involved.
Wonderful. Should sexual content be allowed in school libraries? If so, what age should that content be allowed at?
I do not believe so. I support the law that has been officially put into our code. That's a bright line rule. Um, I think that sexually explicit information doesn't belong in schools.
Mhm.
Our public libraries, our bookstores will continue to offer that. And I think that a parent will know much better than anyone else if their children are ready for that kind of content. My concern in schools, and actually my kids have come to me where they started reading a book they got out of a library and they're like, ew, mom, like I didn't want to read this. And there's no warnings. There's no sections that say this is the young adult section or this section has books with sexually explicit content.
Yeah.
And so I think that, for a while before those laws were solidified, where, we are kind of going back and forth and there were library book committees, I had asked our school board to simply provide an automatic notification. I thought that would have been a great middle ground. If my kids are late with a book, I get a email saying you're going to have a 10-cent fine every day. I feel like it would have been a really easy automatic notification to say, hey, these books are on a list. They're being considered by a library committee to review sexually explicit content. We just want to let you know your child checked it out. And then parents would be able to say, hey, I saw you check this book out. What do you think about it? And then they can start a conversation. They can have a teaching moment. But that wasn't an option. That wasn't even a discussion. I didn't even get a response to that idea.
Mhm.
And so really, I think that parents need to be able to be involved in what their children are reading. As minors, adults shouldn't be enabling sexually explicit content. I've oftentimes heard some people say, well, children need to be able to read other stories about traumas they've been in. And to that, I think, that may be true, but if we're talking about trauma, then we probably need a counselor to be involved because you never know what that may trigger, or especially you need the parents to be involved so that they can follow up with their student.
Agreed. And I want to open it up now to Kent and Jill. Do you have any additional questions you'd like to ask before we finish with Nikki?
I might just ask a quick question. When we go back to that topic of, who should really control education, meaning the parents or the government, so to speak,
Mhm.
um, how do you best go about, and the answer was parents that
Mhm.
you gave, how do you go about getting a consensus from the parents? Or you may have some parents that think this is appropriate and this is what I want my child to do, and others might say the opposite. So how do we get to that answer?
Yeah, and let me maybe back up just a little bit. Who's in charge of education? I would say we have institutional education led by professionals, and they have advanced degrees. And in a lot of ways, they build these institutions so that our students can attend them and they can learn effectively. That being said, I do think that when there are issues, for instance, if there's objectionable material, recently there was a case at the Supreme Court where they said, if a parent feels like an educational material conflicts with their religious ideals, they should be allowed to opt out. And I thought that that was a very fair way of dealing with that. The parent gets to control the educational resources their children are being exposed to through that opt-out process. But at the same time, that case showed us that's not the parent saying, well, we're going to change the entire educational structure. Those institutions are still using their professional insight and training to provide education as they feel they need to provide the highest level of education. And so it really is a balance. And it will always be a balance. I don't think we'll ever be able to say, this is the line where parents get the say or where educators get the say. But there's going to be, issues that come and go, and we need to be able to engage parents. And I've seen that in our districts where the district will send out surveys to parents. Hey, we're thinking about changing the way we communicate, or we're changing the school schedule. Give us some feedback. And I think that that's a great way to keep parents involved and engaged in some of those bigger decisions, while recognizing, those professional educators have gone to the advanced degrees, the advanced education to help us.
Mhm.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Any other questions before we move on to Mary, who's the
I
second?
don't have any.
Okay.
I'm just gathering information.
Okay, wonderful. Nikki, thank you. And thank you so much for being willing to serve, especially since it probably wasn't something you wanted to do, it sounds. It sounds like you jumped in because you didn't feel like a need was being met. So I really appreciate you being willing to do that and to serve our children. So
Well,
thank
and I would say I would like to do it, and it would be an honor to do. And
you.
so I do hope that if anyone has any other questions, they reach out, and I'd love to continue these conversations.
Wonderful.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Nikki. Uh, okay. Uh, I have taken Nikki out of the meeting and now I'm admitting Mary. Mary, can you hear us? Mary, can you hear us? You're muted, Mary. Let's see. Yes, unmute.
Can you hear it? There.
Oh,
How's that?
Good.
that's perfect.
Okay.
Thank you for your patience. It took us a while to get through the first one. My questions must be a little more hard to answer or longer to answer than I thought. But Mary, I'd love it if you'd tell us a little bit about yourself and just introduce yourself to us.
Okay. I have lived in Highland for I'm going on my 23rd year. We had a little short stint up in Canada. But other than that, we have been Highlanders. I'm originally from Connecticut, but have been basically West Coast since I came out to college at BYU. I have 5 kids. They've all gone through school here.
Mhm.
They all graduated from Lone Peak High School. And since I moved back, and my youngest, actually, he was in preschool, I have been heavily involved in PTA. So every school my kids have been in, we're kind of on first name basis with the teachers and all the staff and everybody. So, and that's pretty much why I actually was not going to run for school board, but I had so many teachers and admin say this, just will you think about doing this, because we would love to have you part of this, and a lot of parents too, because I know a lot of parents and people in our community, especially Highland. So
Wonderful. Yeah, that's great reasons. What do you have to offer as a school board member?
um well, I that's a really interesting question, because that is an interesting question. I get it asked all the time, and I mean, I think a lot of, probably anybody who willingly signs up to serve on the school board has some experience or some idea of what they want to do. But I think mine is that I know a lot of the principals. I know a ton of the teachers, and I know a ton of parents. So I feel like I have a lot of connection already with the community, so that I have a pulse point. Like, there's 20 people I can call and say, "Hey, what are your concerns? Tell me your concerns." And I was just the PTA president for PTSA president for Lone Peak, and there had been kind of a disconnect before. I had a little minute where I didn't have a high schooler, and I came back and I was like, "Whoa, what's happened here?" There's just been a little bit of disconnect, which I think a lot of it was that there was 3 principals, and that's a hard transition, especially after Rhonda left. But um, we really had a lot of interaction more with the parents and the teachers, and I feel like we resolved a lot of things, and we became such a tight community. And I feel like that's my goal as board member, to let everybody feel like they have a voice and their opinions and feelings matter.
Wonderful. Did you support the school district split and why?
I actually didn't.
Okay.
And that's because I have tons of, obvious, again, educators and friends that said, it's in process, but we're still kind of working on the very best way to um, have this split happen, and like, just give us a little bit more time. So I actually did not support it, but I think we all knew it was going to happen, and it was too big. Alpine School District was too big. So I support the change. I just didn't, I thought it was a tiny bit soon, but it's okay. We'll be fine.
Uh-huh. So you supported the split, but just not as fast as it happened with the
Yeah.
vote that took place among the people here.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. How soon would you have preferred it kind of happen? What time frame were you looking at?
Well, I think they were in the middle of doing a lot of, impact studies, and I think I would have liked to have waited till we had all of that information, but
So not a clear time when you thought it would be right, just it should be pushed out till more research had been done.
mhm.
Was that
Yeah,
describe it a little? I'm
yeah,
not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm just trying
yeah.
to
No,
understand.
that's okay. Nope, I feel like that for sure. And but I do support. I mean, I think all of us have felt like it's a bit big, and it needed to kind of, it wasn't serving everybody's needs. I know there was bonds that didn't get passed, that we needed things at Lone Peak and other elementary schools, just because the needs were so big everywhere else. So
Yeah,
that's a problem that we needed to address. So,
makes sense. Okay. The next question, should the federal government be involved in our kids' education? If so, what involvement should they have?
well, I mean, we all pay taxes to a federal government, and I think the most important thing, in my opinion,
Mhm.
is raising a educated next generation. And I think that we could put our tax money to no better place than our children's education. But I think it's important for the states to decide, just like I think it's really important to take into account like the principal, like each elementary school, each junior high and high school, like we need to take into account their specific needs, and nobody would know it better than them. And I think the same thing with the states. I think that they really should have a lot of the say in where that money goes and how it is spent.
Sounds good. A follow-up question. So the 10th Amendment says that if the federal government doesn't have a right to intercede unless it's outlined in the Constitution, which education definitely is not outlined in the Constitution, how does the federal government get its authority to intervene in education?
I
Um,
don't I don't think I'm well enough versed with that. Are
okay.
you just asking my opinion on how that happens, or
Yeah.
my
Oh, that's okay. You don't have, you can say you don't know. I don't want to put you on the spot, no.
no, I
So
know.
just
It's
checking.
been a long
Um,
time.
yeah, oh, no problem. Let's see. How do you feel about vouchers?
What, as in,
School vouchers. So, parents that don't have the opportunity
oh,
or feel like their kids should be somewhere else, they're paying taxes that for their school's education, for the public school education, but then they're also paying directly to a private school or to homeschool. And so they're basically paying for their child's education twice. Vouchers are set up to try to offset that cost a little bit when parents have chosen to put their kids in a different place than the public school system. So yeah, my question is, how do you feel about vouchers? That-
I think it's great. I have concerns about, obviously, like, will that take away from the bottom line of kids who, you know, maybe have high needs in our school systems. And I, I would have to look at it pretty carefully, but I personally think that it should be like, if the school system is not meeting your child's need, like I have nephews and nieces who are autistic, and the school systems aren't meeting their needs, I'm absolutely for helping them, because other private schools are really too expensive for them. And I think if we can take care of all of our students, and if that means we need to give vouchers to help them get the best education they can, I'm in favor of that.
Okay. So you would fight for vouchers if you're on the school board. You'd fight for parents to be able to have the option of putting their kids somewhere else and getting the money that would be in the school program being put towards their child. Is that right?
Well, and I need to learn a lot more about that, because I'm more familiar of it in other states, and I'm not sure how we have done that so far. But yeah, I would say sure. I really am in favor of parents getting their children's the best education they think, and if it's not getting their needs met,
Hmm.
let's help them.
Wonderful. Okay. Should parents or government have the ultimate say in a child's education? What's your opinion on that?
Okay, so this is yeah, this is a really interesting thing. So I'm going to give you a little background on me. I
Sure.
was homeschooled from first grade to 11th grade. I went back to school, and my parents were constantly, it's Connecticut. It was technically illegal for us to be homeschooled. So my parents were walking a line of what the government had, and they had to go through all these hoops. And I feel like, and the biggest problem was that they said, what if you're in a home that is not a good home and your parents are there? And I actually witnessed that, where parents had homeschooled their kids and it was a really bad situation.
Right.
So I feel like there is definitely a concern, but I think there's a balance, right? And we need to make sure that, again, I would say it would go more on a local level to make sure that these kids are in a safe environment. And um, I mean, we've had very high profile situations in Utah where those things were happening. So we have to be really careful about that. But I think ultimately parents do have the final say, and they should, because they, again, are in the hot seat. They know what's going on with their kids, and they're the best versed to say what would be best for them.
Yes. Wonderful. What would you do to empower parents in their child's education?
I think just giving them information. Like I've just been amazed at how much they don't know the resources that their kids can have, and that there's advocates at all the schools if your kids are struggling, if they feel bullied. There's so many resources that parents don't know about. And I think they also don't know how hard and how much the teachers really love their kids. And I think educating them on their, like you talked about vouchers, like just making education be something that empowers kids and parents and not makes them feel lost or unseen.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Should sexual content be allowed in school libraries? If so, what age should that content be allowed?
I mean, oh, these are also really hard because I know everybody has different opinions. I I feel like, it is a fact of life, and it's something that I think the more education that kids have is empowers them, but I think it needs to be done very delicately and with parents' approval. I think that they should know exactly what their kids are getting taught, and
Mhm.
that they can choose whether or not that's there. And I think, it's really hard. I'm an English major. I have my master's in English. I'm also an author, and I write very clean things, but I understand that there's like this very big debate on what you should and shouldn't read. And I think, again, I would say I am an advocate for beautiful writing and good stories. And I think that we need, again, education, and let parents, like, if the majority of the parents don't feel comfortable with certain books or certain content, then I don't think, you know, again, if they're uncomfortable with it, then that should be something that's brought up, and that maybe it won't be in the school libraries.
Mhm.
um or again, read, if they're, I feel like we really have to do a majority. That doesn't mean that there can't be discussion, right, and all that stuff, but I feel like we need to work together to make everyone feel comfortable.
Gotcha. Sounds good. And the second part of that question is, it sounds like there is room for that if there's consent from parents and the community and community specific. Is there an age that you would say that there should be no sexual content below that age, or do you think it should just be based on the community overall?
Well, I would like it never, because I want my kids to live in a fairy tale, and everyone to live in a fairy tale world. But I do think that, I would say absolutely not before 14, but that's, again, me. And if the community feels like that's they want it at a different age, I would listen to them. And I think that that's a really important part of it. And I think, giving them information, like if 90% of the families feel like it's okay under that, and 10% don't, I would say, okay, we need to inform the 10% that maybe this is what's going on, these are the titles, just, again, I really feel like it's information that we need to get out, and to be have consensus.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And I think that's all the set questions. I would like to open up to Kent and Jill if they have any questions that they would like to ask also. And if not, then we can move on.
I
Okay.
I
I
don't think I
don't.
have any. I want to thank you though, Mary, for taking the time and the answers you've given. Much appreciated.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
And
I really
I want to add on that. Thank you for volunteering your time for this. And I've run for a political office before, and it was very difficult. And it takes a special. I know that you care about the community because of your efforts here, and appreciate you doing that.
Oh, thank you so much. I know it's a labor of love. Civil servant has become a whole new meaning for me. Thank you
It's
so much.
difficult. All right. Well, thank you, and we will move on to our next part of our
All right. Have a
discussion.
great afternoon.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Okay. There's still three of us left here, and yeah, this will be posted. Um, I do want to talk about the other two candidates. we can at least look at their information that they have. So I'm going to go to voteforjonathan.com and share my screen real quick, and maybe we can have a little discussion about him. Um, so we get a little bit of coverage for those that are interested in the other candidates and how they can learn more about them. So let me prepare my screen here to share that. In the meantime, feel free, Kent, do you have any thoughts about the two candidates so far that you would like to share? What things you liked, things you feel differently about either way?
Well, just an observation, and of course, it's not my community, so it's not something I would be voting on, of course. But um, you know, Nikki sounds like she's a little bit more prepared in the sense of she's looked at a lot of the issues and addressed them and talked probably with a broader group of people than perhaps Mary has.
Mhm.
Mary, I think certainly has an ability to grasp things, and I think if she learns more, she could be very effective. Um, but I think the questions you have, Rob, are good ones, and you're able to pull out of them some important aspects that they might differentiate how they would go about their work if they were elected.
Uh-huh.
But both very good candidates.
Wonderful. Hey, Jonathan has a little video here, and I want to share that. So hold on, let me get that going. Share my screen here. Let's see. And I'm not amazing with technology, so if you don't hear the sound, then I apologize. But maybe cut me off if you don't hear the sound here.
I'm running for Aspen Peaks School Board. Alpine School District has
Do you hear the sound?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Here we go.
been around for over 100 years, and it's the largest school district in Utah. Breaking up an institution that large and that old isn't going to be easy as slicing up a sheet cake. It's going to take a lot of untangling to become three functioning school districts. By many measurements, the new Central School District, the Aspen Peaks School District, is poised to come out of this split in a good position. We have a stable tax base, and the decline in enrollment we are experiencing as some areas age is balanced by the growth we are still experiencing in other areas. But that doesn't mean we're out of the woods. In preparation for Aspen Peaks School District official opening in 2027, we need responsible school board members, members who understand budget and believe in transparency. We need leaders with teaching experience who are versed in education policy and who are able to use data to drive important decisions. And most importantly, we're going to need representatives who care about the future of public education. I'm a lead software engineer and work with numbers constantly. I have a master's of business administration, and I know how to collect, analyze, and process data. I taught courses at the U of U and BYU. I will follow education law made by our state legislature. I also will develop policies in line with our state school board. I will help decrease class sizes to ensure our kids and teachers thrive. And I want all three of these new school districts to succeed. And I want the families of the new Aspen Peaks School District to know that I will stand up for them. That even as things are changing, my goal is to be a representative you can depend on through it all.
Okay. That was pretty impressive. And oh, he's got a map of District 3. This is the area that is covered by this school district, which is Highland and a small part of Lehigh. That's good to have that there. Um, he says he's a proven leader, experience with the education policy. I know he volunteered over at the elementary close to where I'm at. He was part of the committee there. I think they call it the SCC. And a little bit, I have a reputation of being pretty conservative, and I called him up and had some discussions. I found that he and I disagreed on a lot of most points that I asked him. It might have scared him about being on this. I'm not sure if he thought I would attack, which I wouldn't have done. But I like to hear people let people just speak for themselves for the most part. Since he's not here, I will tell you that our conversations were definitely different. Our opinions were definitely different regarding the federal government involvement. He seemed to want the federal government more involved than I would like. I don't believe he was in favor of the school split. I am more in favor of localized control of wherever it can be and unless it really makes sense to be a larger area. And he and I disagreed a little bit on that. He and I agreed on some other issues that he'd been working on. I can't remember exactly. He was working on uh, some political issue that he and I talked about, and I said, yeah, I agree with you on that political issue. Um, at first, he said he would join and then backed out. So I think he's got a lot of skills. He and I might disagree politically, but he definitely has some talents and background and skills in many things. So I don't think he would be a bad choice either as a school, not being on the school district, except for where I disagree politically. The last candidate, she also has, I'll just share, I don't really know much about her. She didn't have her email address or her phone number on her application. But I was able to find that information out and then get a hold of her and reached out to her a couple times and she said, "Hi, my apologies, I'm on vacation, but I'll have time in 45 minutes to talk to you. Will that work for you?" That was late last night, and I just said, "No, I'm actually busy at that time, but I'd love you to join our meeting." She said, "Okay, let me see if I can make it happen." And today she said, "Hi, Rob, I'm sorry I'm not going to be able to make it. I'm on vacation and we got held up. I love that you put this together." I don't know much about her except for she has been a school counselor before and worked at UVU, and that she's been a really strong advocate of LGBTQ issues. That is most of what I know about her, and hopefully I can get to know her a little bit more going forward. Okay, that's all I know about the candidates so far.
And
What other?
what was her name, Rob?
Her name is Jennie Hall.
Okay.
Uh, and so we've got Nicki Brammer, who we talked to first. We've got Mary Thomas, who we talked to second. We've got Jonathan Bellaharo. I hope I pronounced that right. And we've got Jennie Hall, the four candidates. And so I hope this was helpful for those that are trying to get to know a little bit more about the candidates, and we'll put it on YouTube and share it. One other thought that I wanted to bring up really quickly is in relation to schools. I my personal opinion is that the parents are the ultimate authority when it comes to their kids' education. They know them, they know their needs. And that is probably one of my most important criteria is that parents are allowed to be in charge. And of course, unless there's abuse known or anything like that, then sometimes the state has to step in. But in most cases, I would say trust the parents. They know what their children need for the most part. Um, there's a book that I read at one time called The Law by Frederick Bastiat. He argued that if I don't have a right to do something to my neighbor or force my neighbor to do something, then an organization of me and my neighbors do not have that right either. And that's to me, that's important regarding schools. There's been some communities, some states that feel like they should force everyone to participate in the public school system. And if if there were, if you were just in a community that didn't have all the supporting infrastructure, if you just lived somewhere out in the boonies next to someone, could they come to your house and force you to do the same school program they're doing? No, they couldn't. How about if there was five? Could the five then come and force you to do that? No, and that we need to remember that when we're thinking about government and force and control. And so that's a really important point to me. I think that parents are the ultimate authority. And anyway, any thoughts from anyone else? Okay.
Jill, you got to say something.
Like I said, I was here to listen. I don't necessarily have the same viewpoints on some of the things, but I like to be an informed voter. And um, when I saw this come up on my feed, I thought that's something I should listen to so that as we
We,
get closer, I have an idea of what they represent and what they want.
Mhm. And Jill was an educator for how many years, Jill?
39 and a half.
39 and a half years. And just seeing how she deals with kids, she was probably one of the best there is out there. She was amazing. So,
Thank you. I love I love kids. I love the schools. I volunteer now in the
yeah.
school 1 day a week
Hmm.
because I think it's important.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, any other thoughts before we end? Okay.
Thanks for pulling it together, Rob.
Yep. Thanks everybody, and we'll post it online. Thanks a lot.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks a
Talk to y'all
bunch.
later. Yep.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye.